Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me tonight on another episode of Spain the Need. I am Anthony Spano. Tonight, my guest has many years of service in the Mahoning Valley, has been around for a very long time, and pretty much knows what he's doing. My guest tonight, Jim Cossler, the current Huntington Bank entrepreneur in residence and the former CEO of the Youngstown Business Incubator. Jim, thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having us.
I got that right? The Huntington Bank entrepreneur in residency. Is that correct?
You want to make sure you put Huntington Bank in there. They're a great supporter of this organization.
And there's a lot of supporters, and you've been living in the valley. You've been here most of your life, not maybe all of your life, to really help develop downtown Youngstown and the surrounding area. Talk a little bit about kind of how it all started to where you are now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The Business Journal did a story recently, and the reporter remarked that during my entire professional career, I've really only moved about 2 blocks, right? So, when I got out of Youngstown State University, I grew up on the west side of Youngstown, and I was one of the famous YMCA rats. Took the WRTA bus from Kirkmere Elementary School down to the YMCA, beginning when I was about 8 years old. And when I got out of college, I'd majored in philosophical literature, so there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities for me with that major. A job opened up at the YMCA, so I started kind of on the east end of downtown, and eventually through a series of different jobs with the Better Business Bureau, with the Chamber of Commerce, I kept moving to the west end of downtown, which is where we're at today.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, and we talk about how you only moved 2 blocks, which actually in a city, maybe a big city, that would be tremendously a big thing. But in Youngstown downtown is maybe only 5 blocks crosswise. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yep, exactly.
And let's talk about, you started out at the Y, you got hired there.
Yep.
And talk a little bit about that position and kind of what you experienced there.
So I was hired as their youth director, which was a non-physical fitness position. It wasn't aquatics, it wasn't physical education, but it was basically taking care of the young kids that came to the Y in the youth lobby as they prepared to be called into their aquatics class or their phys ed class or their gym classes, and run programs for them as well. So one of the things that I took away from that job is, if you're a youth director at any YMCA, you become just a killer ping pong player. So I played a lot of ping pong, and at one point, it was hard to find somebody who could beat me at ping pong. So it was a great experience.
Well, in speaking of experience, I had a conversation with this gentleman, may ring a bell, that you used to work with, by a guy by the name of Jack Rigney.
Oh, Rigney, I've known since high school.
And I talked to Rigney about you and him out at the Y, and I was wondering, and I didn't know that, but was he your ping pong competitor, or didn't he play ping pong?
Yeah. Rigney tried to play ping pong, but I'd slaughter him.
Yeah, that's good. And actually, he left me a quote for you.
Oh, great.
Jim is one of the great guys who was always very helpful for people, grew up and was always a stand-up guy, and we just were always together and had a blast.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
And what do you, I mean, you guys have known each other. What was that like? You got to work together?
Yeah, so Riggs was a beast. He was probably one of the most physically fit people I've ever met. He was our aquatics director, both at the downtown YMCA and at Camp Fitch is where we all headed to in the summertime. And, we've had some interesting experiences, and I think our best experiences are our famous road trips, where we would just pack up the car with our sleeping bags and some food, and then just drive and not even know where we were headed to, and spend a long weekend just like driving to new places all through the Midwest. I think we actually got one time on when we both had vacation, we got all the way out to the Pacific Coast on a really famous road trip.
No, that had to be an adventure.
They were.
Yeah. Let's talk. So you talked a little bit about in your start that you kind of went to the chamber and then worked your way a couple blocks and then we're at BBB. Talk a little bit about kind of how the transition you were working block to block if you really want to say it to where you are now.
So still at the YMCA, I went from the position of youth director to financial development director. I was in charge of all their fundraising, their capital drives, their membership drives, and did very well at that. On our financial development drives, they previous to my team taking that position, we just never seemed to be able to make goal. We never seemed to be able to make goal with our membership drives. But I had about 6 or 7 years where we not only met every goal of membership development and financial development, we exceeded them. So from there, the Better Business Bureau position came open. They were struggling a little bit. They weren't very financially solvent. I think they saw that I had a track record of raising money and building membership. And so I took the CEO position at the Better Business Bureau of Eastern Ohio, which was based in Youngstown for, I can't even remember now, 7, 8, 9 years, something like that.
Well, and I think you turned that organization around, if I'm not if I'm correctly remembering that.
Right. Yeah, we really built their membership up. We really added to their financial reserves. When I left, they had several $1 million financial reserve, and we did it through creating new programs for Better Business Bureau members that didn't previously exist. And one of the things that we did was we became a business resource center for our members' questions. And we called it our corporate services division. And it really dramatically increased the number of non-traditional businesses that would never think of joining a Better Business Bureau before, business to business kind of companies, manufacturers never would have done that before. They joined because of the strength of our corporate services division.
Well, and that kind of takes me to where you kind of met a great colleague of yours that you guys have kind of really built a good leadership team no matter where you've gone, and that would be the CEO, Barb Ewing of the YBI. Talk about how you first met Barb, because we'll get into a little bit about how you guys have kind of transformed to be a great team.
Yeah, so as our organization was growing at the Better Business Bureau, we had some new staffing needs. Barb had just graduated from Kent State University. I think she graduated with a degree in American Studies, so kind of like my philosophical literature major.
Interesting degrees to run these massive nonprofits.
Right. So, I interviewed her. I really, again, fresh out of college, not with a degree that I thought would add to her experience, but on the first interview, she just blew me away. She was so bright. She was so personable. She was very aggressive, if you will. And I hired her on to kind of run our corporate services division at the BBB. And we worked there together for probably 4 or 5 years, and got a call from the chamber. I think we were kind of becoming a little bit threatening to the chamber. We were taking a lot of the membership. I wouldn't say we took them away from the chamber, but they saw our membership growth. They saw our business growth, where they were pretty stagnant in their growth of their members. And they wanted me to come over to be senior vice president for corporate services and bring that kind of corporate services program that we built at the Better Business Bureau to the chamber. And one of the things I said to them was, well, it's a 2-for-1 deal. I'll come, but you're going to have to let me bring Barb with me, because she's just indispensable for what we're doing. So that's really how Barbara originally got to the chamber. Once she got to the chamber, though, she just took off. I mean, she really just took off. I think she worked for me for 6 months before they elevated her to a vice president position.
Yeah, and I worked for Barb under, I was an intern at Congressman Tim Ryan's office. Oh, God, 20 years ago. I mean, 16 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, and I was an intern under Barb and Congressman Ryan and a variety of the staff that was there, which was an experience. You get a different perspective of what goes on behind the scenes and how much is really getting done that you don't know in normal public eye.
Yeah, I think I left the chamber. Yeah, I know I did. I left the chamber first. And Barb probably left a few years later to join Congressman Ryan's. But so this is kind of like our reunion tour. When our growth at YBI got to the point where, boy, I really needed a chief operating officer. I just couldn't do all the daily functions that were necessary to run this organization as large as it's become. We reached out to Barb and offered her the chief operating officer position at YBI, and thank goodness she took it.
Well, it's funny because I actually interviewed Barb probably about a month ago, about talking about the YBI and everything like that, and it was interesting to just kind of hear her story, that it looks almost the same path as yours, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's like a package deal going to one organization. She's coming with you. Maybe not 6 months away, but she'll be there in some capacity.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it shows what kind of team you guys came to be over the years, that you guys are great to work together. You knew what each other thought of what you were thinking in your head. No matter if you thought about it or not, you probably have said words that she was about to say, and vice versa.
Yeah. And the reason it was so great was, we're such a huge organization now. We're probably the largest landlord in downtown Youngstown with all 5 buildings. And just on the operational side of 5 buildings, that's a lot to do. And I was getting to the point where I wasn't able to do what I love. And what I love is working with founders. I love working with startups. I love working with entrepreneurs, but I was spending all my time in board meetings and executive committee meetings and committees and subcommittees and accountants and attorneys. And I just had no time left to do what I'm passionate about.
What you love.
What I'm passionate about is, I love founders. I love risk takers. I love dreamers. So the stepping down as CEO of YBI and elevating Barb to CEO of YBI was a best thing that could have ever happened to me. And she's just been amazing as our CEO, just amazing. She has grown this organization far beyond what I think anyone imagined we could do.
Well, let's talk about it. You came in '98, give or take, as the CEO of YBI.
Right.
What was that experience like, going kind of from the chamber to this maybe not newer organization, but close to being new in its experience, what you were looking at and what you were kind of looking towards in the future?
Yeah, I don't know if it was my first day on the job at YBI or my second day on the job, but I actually called the chamber and said, "Can I come back?"
Really?
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned and one of the things I coach about is the incredible need of doing due diligence before you make a move. And had I done any due diligence on YBI, had I asked for their financial statements, had I asked for their last year or two of board minutes and read them, I am convinced I wouldn't have taken the job. I mean,
Interesting.
we were just in such bad shape. We were one floor, one renovated floor of one building. We had no financial reserves. We're funded in large measure today, but we're certainly funded almost exclusively back in '98 from the state of Ohio, and covered letters where we were on probation. We needed to get our act together. We needed to drive the kind of performance metrics that the state expected, and should we not be able to do that, we were going to lose all of our funding. So had I known all of that, we wouldn't be talking today, probably.
That's an interesting story. Do many people know that story?
I'm not sure, but you know it now.
Yeah, we're about to know it. You're retiring. that was 22 years ago.
2 years ago, 22 years ago. So, it was a really, really rough start for me. I was actively looking for something else, another position. On the other hand, I couldn't abandon my employer. I couldn't just say I give up. So I spent the first, I suppose, 6 to 9 months trying to repair stakeholder relationships, trying to put the organization on the right financial footing, and trying to put together a business plan that could actually deliver the performance metrics that all of our stakeholders wanted, and that was job creation and revenue creation. Thought we came up with a really good plan to do exactly that. And lo and behold, the state of Ohio passes the Third Frontier program. So the Third Frontier program, which is still here today, was a multi-billion-dollar taxpayer-funded bond initiative to advance the acceleration of technology-based businesses throughout the state of Ohio. And so when that occurred, all the state grantees that made sense for Third Frontier, we were all called to Columbus, and we were told effectively, in 6 months, you have 6 months to figure out a way how to scale technology-based businesses in your community. And I remember driving back from Columbus and thinking, how the heck are we going to do that in Youngstown? 20 years ago, how are we going to launch scalable technology-based businesses in Youngstown when we lack the 3 primary drivers of those kinds of businesses? And so if you look at the research, there's 3 primary drivers to tech-based businesses into a tech-based economy. The first is a research university. I went to Youngstown State University. I got one heck of an education there. I got an unbelievably good education there.
Same here.
But in its 100+ year history, as far as I know, it has never spun off a successful high-tech startup. It's not Carnegie Mellon. It's not Stanford. It's not Berkeley, right? We've got great hospitals in the Valley. We got wonderful healthcare in the Valley, but we don't have a Cleveland Clinic or a UPMC that's spinning out a new bioscience, pharmacology, medical device company almost every month in Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And we're Youngstown, right? We're not Palo Alto. We're not Mountain View. We're not Austin. We're not Boston. We did not have the high concentration of indigenous tech companies like those communities do. Tech companies that are constantly shedding bright young engineers with an idea for a startup. So again, lacking all of those drivers, we had to do it differently in Youngstown to be successful. And we did do it differently, and we have been very successful.
What were some of kind of the talking points to bring some of these startups from different places in either the United States or pretty much the world?
So, I mean, one of the things we did when we kind of reinvented YBI 20 years ago from the traditional mixed use incubator, here's some cheap office space, there's a photocopier, there's a fax machine. Now go turn yourself into a world-class corporation. That doesn't work anywhere. And it certainly didn't work in Youngstown. But one of the things we did as we made this conversion to a technology-based incubator was we took the position that it would be a mistake for us to try to be good at every single technology. And it would be a mistake because you're never going to have the resources. You're never going to have the finances. You'll never gain or build the domain expertise to be good at every technology that knocks on your door. And so rather than being mediocre at everything that knocks on our door and producing mediocre results, we didn't think that's what our stakeholders wanted. What we chose to do is let's just pick a single technology that makes sense for Youngstown. And so we went through an exercise that every MBA candidate is trained to do. Exclude things before you include things. So it's really easy to exclude things, So why should we even try polymers when you've got the University of Akron and a world-class polymer industry in Akron? Why should we try to do medical devices when you've got the Cleveland Clinic an hour away? Why should we try to even touch robotics or artificial intelligence when Carnegie Mellon's an hour away? But as we kept excluding technology, we kept coming back to software. So 20 years ago, there's only really two divisions of software: B2B and B2C. So business to business, a business that develops an application another business can use, or B2C, business to consumer, a business that develops software for a consumer to use. We eliminated the B2C side. And the reason we eliminated the B2C side was the high cost of customer acquisition. And 20 years ago, we didn't think venture capital was coming to Youngstown. But we focused exclusively on B2B for a couple of reasons. That is the lowest capitalization cost of any startup on the planet. You've got a laptop, you know how to program, you could be a B2B software company. The second reason is location of those companies is completely irrelevant. The customer's use of software stops with the interface. They don't care what's on the other side of the interface. They don't know what's on the other side of the interface. And so the other side of the interface could be in Palo Alto, or it could be in Youngstown, Ohio. So why can't it be in Youngstown, Ohio? Not a whole lot of people believed that 20 years ago, but we believed it.
Well, and I think it showed how you built your portfolio to really bring these companies locally.
Right. So the second way we differentiated ourselves was at almost every incubator in the world, with the exception of Youngstown, the model is you grab a group of companies, you incubate them, you pour every resource you have into them, you accelerate them, and then you do the dumbest thing you could ever do. You take those companies you worked so hard with, you invested so much time, so many resources in, and then you go scatter those really early stage companies back across your region, tell them, good luck, you're on your own. If you look at the really, really critical studies of incubators, what you're going to find is the failure rate of incubated companies, similarly situated incubated companies, is almost identical to the failure rate of early stage companies that were never incubated. You absolutely did nothing for them. Our concept in Youngstown is we wanted to use the incubator as a catalytic engine for what we think is our most important role, and that is to develop a hyper cooperative managed cluster of technology companies that employ the brightest, the most creative, the most talented people this region already has, or we can attract from other parts of the country to this region. So what we're doing in Youngstown and why we have so many buildings is we're moving from incubation to acceleration to becoming commercial tenants at commercial market rates in real estate that we own in downtown Youngstown, because number one, why would you ever graduate a revenue stream? Our commercial real estate is a revenue stream for us that we put back into our incubation and acceleration programs, the profits. But more importantly, why would you ever want to graduate and scatter all the amazing talent, all the knowledge, all the networks and resources that your companies have acquired? Because what we're trying to do with this managed cooperative cluster is when somebody comes onto the campus today, one person digital startup company, what I'll tell them is there's several hundred people working here. You want to talk to search engine optimization experts? Fine, I'll set it up for you. Do you want to talk to brand development specialists? Fine, I'll set it up for you. Do you want to talk to customer acquisition specialists? Fine, we'll set that up for you. The role of every accelerated and graduated company is we expect, where possible, practical, and reasonable, that they give back to the one or two person startup that followed them through the door.
Well, and that's a good thing is, so you mentioned you have 5 buildings in downtown Youngstown. How many employees do you have, maybe not the YBI, but in general, in those 5 buildings that work downtown or work in general?
Yeah, several hundred. I really don't know. I don't look at those metrics anymore.
Well, and now then probably you're 7 or 8 years in, and then that's when Barb, well, maybe a little bit later, but Barb Ewing comes in to help you out. How did that feel when Barb kind of got started and took away some of that day to day that you can really concentrate on what you love to do?
It was the best day of my life. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, again, it was in the early years, the growth was fun. It was exciting to watch us grow. It was exciting to watch our reputation expand regionally and then nationally, and then even internationally, our reputation expanded. But the the requirements of running an organization this big were just overwhelming. But
Well,
she flourishes at that.
well, in speaking of Barb, I talked to her as well. Oh, don't worry, I got plenty of these. Barb Barb says that Jim's biggest achievement is working to help Youngstown display its belief itself. He has worked tirelessly across the board to change the trajectory of Youngstown from building companies to cleaning up litter. No one is more dedicated to the city than he is.
Oh, that was very nice of her. Very nice
How
of
do you
her.
respond? How do you respond to something like that from one of your colleagues?
Embarrassed?
No.
I'm not sure. I mean, next time you interview Barb, interview me, and I'll give you some great quotes about her. She's just an amazing leader of this organization.
Should I bring you on at the same time?
Yeah, you'll watch us fight, but yeah, sure, go ahead.
Hey, it's good entertainment.
Yeah.
Now, what? So we talk about that over the years. You were named one of the top 10 technology evangelists in Northeast Ohio by the Cleveland Plain Dealer years ago, and you're also one of the influential men back then. Kind of talk about what happened in 2014 when you got a call from the other side of the world, if you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so in 2014, there's a research organization that's based in Stockholm, Sweden, and they've been benchmarking the top performing incubators around the world. So in Asia, North America, South America, Europe, even Africa. And in 2014, we got the call that after a really deep examination of our operations, they decided that we were the #1 university affiliated incubator in the entire world. And we had a pretty good reputation already at that point, but that just lit us up, because if we had been in, San Francisco, if we had been in Austin, if we had been in Stuttgart, if we had been in Tel Aviv, I don't think many people would have questioned that the #1 university affiliated incubator could be located in one of those cities. But when they said it was Youngstown, Ohio, everybody said, what? And so, yeah, for quite a while, we were inundated with calls from other accelerators, other incubators. So what are you guys doing in Youngstown that really sets you so far apart? And I think what we've told other incubators is very early on, one of the things I realized when I was CEO and still coaching companies was all the talent and all the knowledge that I would need and our companies would need wasn't necessarily going to be in Youngstown. It's going to be in other places. So about 15 years ago, we started to ask a question about Youngstown that every community like us in the country should be asking of itself. And the question we started asking was, what happened to the very best? What happened to the very brightest? What happened to the most creative and talented people who grew up here? Not who lived here for a year, but they were born here. They went to grade school, middle school, high school. But what happened to them upon completion of their academic studies when they couldn't find the high paying, high value job they wanted to stay here with? They went to Youngstown State, they went to University of Akron, they went to Kent State or Hiram or Slippery Rock, or return here from. They went to Harvard or Stanford or Berkeley. And so for at least 15 years, we've been asking that question. And where is our diaspora? What happened to them? Where do they live? What do they do now? And we've been finding them every single day for 15 years. And they live literally all over the world. And we've developed this network of about 25,000 people. And it's kind of funny. I'll see business stories, maybe in the Vindicator or the Tribune, quoting this executive at this high-tech company. But the Vindicator and the Tribune don't realize that person's mom and dad still live in the Mahoning Valley. He grew up here. She grew up here. And so what we've done now is we have built this network of just amazingly successful people who've got a strong connection to Youngstown that we think can open almost any door anywhere in the world for a startup in Youngstown. Funny story, there's an extremely senior person at Microsoft. He may have retired now. I'll have to check. But I found him about 10 years ago. And I sent him an email and I put Youngstown, Ohio in the header. And he responded to it that evening. And he gave me the direct dial. I said I'd like to talk to him for a few minutes. He gave me the direct dial of his administrative assistant and said, set it up. She'll get you on my calendar. And so when the call came through, I said to him, maybe I should spend a minute or two just explaining what the Youngstown Business Incubator is. And he just started laughing. He said, Jim, you don't have to do that. He said, every time there's an article in the newspaper or a magazine or, a TV interview, whatever, my mom sends it to me. She really wants me to move with her grandchildren back to Youngstown, Ohio. And he said, so let me just set this straight for you, Jim. My wife and I are not going to move back to Youngstown, Ohio. Okay. But my mom and dad live there. My wife's mom and dad live there. We've got brothers and sisters still living there. So here's my cell phone number. Anytime you need anything from Microsoft, you give me a call. I'll make sure it happens for you. Now, if you can imagine, there's 25,000 people like that out there. They want to, they're some are moving back to Youngstown, but the ones that have risen to the very top of their careers aren't. And we get that. We understand that.
I think we all do.
But they're willing to help because this is where they grew up.
And I think you get a lot of that by you look at kind of who graduated from here, what they're doing other parts of the United States or the world. Right. That you got like former Mayor Jay Williams and Ed O'Neill, all Youngstown guys. I mean, then you can go to sports, you can go to business. I mean, you can look at a variety of people, and I think that shows that. And I think you bring up a great point is they leave Youngstown, but Youngstown doesn't leave them.
Exactly. And I don't know why other cities have not done that. I mean, we evangelize about the importance of finding your diaspora network, because I can't remember a single person that we've brought into this network we have for YBI said, I don't want to help. Everybody has been effusive, and they're saying, look, I've heard about you guys. My mom sends me your newspaper articles. I want to help. Just tell me what you need at, the company I'm working for now. And honestly, I don't think a single startup in the Silicon Valley has that good of a network. They have a nice network, but not that good.
Well, how many companies are within your portfolio that have been under your portfolio for years?
Oh, I'm so far away from metrics now. I haven't touched metrics in 4 years. I mean,
okay, back then, what just an average? Like, I don't think what I don't understand. I understand because I'm well involved in community and I've been on several committees with you in the past. Is I know how big YBI is, depending on what you're doing. But I don't, someone that's either in the region or locally, hey, we know what YBI is, but we think of YBI as this, okay, you got buildings, what's that mean? You know what I mean? So just talk about, or at least give an idea, 3 4 years ago, how many kind of these startup companies that you've either helped or over the years in general?
We've probably touched and became deeply involved with at least, I would say, deeply involved, not just touched, but deeply involved, deeply engaged with 50 plus companies. But not all of our companies are necessarily on campus, right? So right now, I would say our hottest startup on the digital side isn't on our campus in Youngstown. It's a company called Reach 24. I think they're up to 45 employees. They provide state-of-the-art logistics optimization software for the trucking industry, and for the industries that support it. They count Amazon as a customer. They count Bridgestone as a customer. They count 5 of the largest trucking companies in North America as a customer. But almost no one has ever heard of Reach 24 with that many.
I haven't, but I know the trucking industry is one of the top industries to move goods. Still is the top one besides planes and trains, but trucking is probably, maybe, I don't know if they are, but I know they are one of the biggest to transport goods and services.
And trucking has, as we've shifted from terrestrial retail to e-commerce, guess what? That
It's
just
bigger.
exploded the trucking industry, just exploded.
And I think that shows what's going on during the pandemic,
Yep.
because people are staying home and you're doing more ordering online. A lot of these retailers are not having the inventory in the store anymore as what they used to. So now everything's moving to trucking. So this helps these types of companies, the Reach 24s that we don't know about.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, and with that, you guys got to have, you got to build your employees, you got to build your internships for your company to support what you do.
Yes, of course.
And I had a discussion with one of them that worked with you, Jillian Smith,
Jillian, she was one of the best ever.
and I talked to her briefly, and she says Jim has the uncanny ability to see exactly what it is in person, idea, or even an entire city. That is great, and it can be developed to become something even greater. He's not impressed by what's trendy, and he can be brutally honest when he sees more fluff than stuff. But when he sees promise, potential, something truly different, he will stop at nothing to turn it into something more and more than it ever could have been otherwise.
I like that.
I like that fluff than stuff. That's a good one.
There was a kind of a meme going around social media, and what they asked you to do in the comment to it was describe your job in the simplest term possible. And so I responded with, I crush dreams. I know there's quite a few people out there that don't like YBI, particularly don't like me. But one of the things we always say to our founders is, look, it's just as much our responsibility to help you build an amazing company and generate amazing wealth for yourself as it is to stop you from wasting your time and your money. And so we always had that conversation on the first discussion with the founder is, look, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. And so we've had some tough conversations with founders who think they're the next Bill Gates, and they're just not. They're just not going to be that.
I crush dreams. I can only imagine. But and if you look at it this way, is you want someone. Now, this is just me personally. I want something. I want honest advice that someone has been in a business that knows what the trends are, if not any. So, hey, you know what? That's going to work. No, it's not going to work. But if you do it this way, it will take off. And I think and if I ever become I start hiring. I've hired people before, but if I ever get to a certain big position, I'm hiring people that are 25 times smarter than me, because that's how it makes your job 10 times easier.
Sure, sure. That's always been my philosophy. Surround yourself with the most talented people you can find.
Yeah, no fluff, just stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I talked to Jill, and it was just funny because just how the quote came out, I laughed like you did.
Yeah, Jillian was in quite a few meetings with me, particularly what we call an intake meeting. The entrepreneur walks through the front door and they've got $1 billion idea, and we sit down with them and, yeah, I don't think so. You know, if there's one thing that I could impart to any budding entrepreneur out there is, please see us at the idea stage. See us when it's just an idea. A lot of people think they aren't supposed to show up at our door till they've started the company. And there's so many incredible mistakes that they can make that just we can't help them recover from, right? And so one of the things that we want to make sure that every entrepreneur does is, before they invest any time or any money on their idea, verify in fact there's a market for it, right? And so over the years, when entrepreneurs have come in here and I said, okay, that might be interesting, but have you verified there's even a marketplace of customers for this? More often than not, I'll hear, yeah, I've done that, Jim. And I said, great. How'd you do that? He said, Jim, everybody I talk to loves my idea. So I'll just sit and smile for a little bit and I tell them, all right, think about what you just said. Everybody is going to love your idea. It's just human nature. No one wants to insult you. No one wants to criticize you. It's just the way we are as humans. And so it's so easy to say, I love your idea, right? And so what we teach our entrepreneurs to do is to do it in the third person. All right. So here's what I want you to do to verify that it might be a marketplace of customers. I want you to go out and talk to 100 people. And here's the way I want you to question them. Hey, I've got a buddy who's got an idea. Take away ownership. Take away ownership of the idea so that people can feel like they can be honest. Then the next thing I want you to say is, and I'm not even sure I think it's a good idea. Invite their criticism. Invite them to attack it. It's not your idea, and they now know you're not even sure it's a good idea. But here's the idea. Now, if 90 people out of 100, 85 people out of 100, 70 people out of 100 say to you, hey, I'm not sure why you don't like your buddy's idea, but I really think he's onto something. I'd like to learn more. Then let's start building the product.
And I want to make sure it's clear. We're mostly YBI is mostly dealing directly with software, correct?
No,
I just want to add.
Right. So we have two focus points now. We're still doing digital. We don't call it software anymore. So we're doing B2B, B2C, augmented reality, virtual reality, machine learning, artificial intelligence. We're doing all those types of platforms here. But, under the leadership of Barb, when she was chairing the Tech Belt Committee, and they successfully put in the winning application for the first of the Obama administration's advanced innovation centers, America Makes, the one everybody in the world wants. When that $70 million innovation center, because of Barb's leadership and the help of a lot of people, most particularly Tim Ryan, landed in Youngstown, we knew we would start getting a ton of additive manufacturing startups. And that's what we call TB5, or the old Vindicator, is. That is exclusively focused on our additive manufacturing startups. So materials, hardware, and there are some killer companies over there, just some killer companies. It's kind of funny. Barb and I had this conversation not long ago, and I really think our focus should be additive manufacturing, because when it comes to digital, when it comes to machine learning, artificial intelligence, software, virtual reality, augmented reality, Youngstown really doesn't have a leg up on other parts of the country, other than the low cost of doing business here and the fact that we built a managed technology cluster and we built this incredible network. But I don't know if that's good enough to bring the best startups, digital companies from all over the country to Youngstown. But what I do think is, between the assets of YBI, between the assets of America Makes, between the assets at Youngstown State University, and the assets of our portfolio companies in the additive manufacturing space, I can honestly say there is no better place in the country to relocate an additive manufacturing company. Nothing can touch Youngstown. We had a pretty high profile San Francisco startup move here, Rugged 3D, and amazing founders, unbelievably amazing founders that started this in San Francisco, and then reached out to us and moved here from San Francisco. And the quote from one of the founders to someone in the media, I don't remember who it was, if YBI would be on the moon, we'd move our company to the moon. There is no place in the country better than Youngstown for additive manufacturing. And so I think a lot of our focus is going to build that out even further.
Well, and let's talk about that. And what are some of the risks and barriers that you guys have when you talk about these companies? Like, you got the one that just said, hey, we're moving to Youngstown. We're going to help. We're going to the YBI. If they were on the moon, we'd go there too. What are some of the kind of the risks and barriers that companies take when you say, hey, we're in Youngstown, Ohio? And
I think primarily the toughest sell we have is, and we've even found a way around this. The toughest sell is, if you're in San Francisco, if you're in Austin, if you're in Raleigh, and you decide you want to move a startup to Youngstown, okay. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to relocate my entire family to Youngstown. What if my startup fails? And I'm going to go to Youngstown with my startup, but my significant other, who's got a real high-paying professional job, is that high-paying professional job going to exist in Youngstown, Ohio for him or her, right? And so one of our strategies has been over the years is, we don't care when you relocate here where you live. We understand, for a lot of reasons, it's going to be hard to have someone pick up from Seattle and move to Youngstown. There's a different quality of life here. Not meaning any offense to Youngstown. You'll find nobody more loyal to Youngstown than me.
Oh, I would so agree.
But we get that. And so what we talk about is, well, let's show you some opportunities for living in Solon, Ohio, or Aurora, Ohio, which some people know, I've been living in Aurora, Ohio for 18 years now. Or
And your cot's out back.
Yeah, or Hudson, Ohio. And the reason we kind of focus on Solon and Aurora and Ohio is you're about a 30-minute drive to downtown Cleveland. You're about a 30-minute drive to downtown Akron. And with me, it's about a 50-minute drive to downtown Youngstown. So we're going to put you and your significant other in a population area that's close to the size of Chicago, with a lot more opportunities for work. But we're also going to put you in a community that has 3 of the best school systems in the state of Ohio. And if you've got children, that's really important to you. So it's really been interesting, not just moving companies here, but hiring C-level talent for some of our growing firms. I can't remember us ever losing our number 1 candidate because they said, no, I'm not going to move to Youngstown, Ohio. Because we technically didn't move them to Youngstown, Ohio, but they're building wealth for Youngstown, Ohio through the company that they've joined or they started.
Well, and that's some good advice, and maybe people don't know what you just said, and that may be some information that other people can use down the road. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. You're retiring in January 2021.
Sort of.
Officially, but we'll still be in probably a consulting type way, because you probably can't leave this without waking up in the morning and say, I need to do something. So I'm going to go.
After January 15th, I will still be involved to a certain degree with YBI, but I won't be driving.
I knew you couldn't leave it.
I won't be driving down. I'll be doing it from my home in Aurora.
Let me ask you this. What are the industries that you think is Youngstown's future with either YBI or just in general?
Again, we literally are the epicenter nationally and perhaps even worldwide for additive manufacturing. And I really think that we as an organization, in conjunction with Youngstown State University and in conjunction with America Makes, needs to continue to build that ecosystem so that there's just no question in anybody's mind, if you're going to do something in additive manufacturing, you're going to touch Youngstown, Ohio. And I think we're pretty close. I really do think we're pretty close to that. I think people would be just floored by the types of companies like Boeing and Lockheed and General Electric who are turning to our expertise in additive manufacturing. The projects we're doing with the Air Force and the military, it is generally recognized in government and in our military services and in private industry that the best place to go for expertise in additive manufacturing is Youngstown, Ohio. YBI might not have it. American Makes might not have it. YSU might not have it. Our portfolio companies might not have it individually, but collectively, we can answer any of their needs.
And that's really good to know. And I appreciate what you've done at YBI and everything, and being a great Youngstowner.
Okay,
and giving back.
But just to be clear, I may have built the digital side of YBI. I didn't have a thing to do with the additive manufacturing. That was all Barb. Additive manufacturing is Barb's baby.
And she told me you'd do that. And I like it, and I appreciate you taking time. I know you're very busy, everything. And at the end of each interview, I like to ask 5 questions. So are you ready?
I hope so.
Now this could be personal or professional, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Best accomplishment?
Marrying my wife.
Oh, okay.
I,
Nothing wrong with that.
I am dead serious about that. My wife is a YSU engineering graduate who decided she didn't like engineering, went to law school, graduated as the valedictorian of her law school class, clerked for a federal judge, which is a major achievement for 2 years, and then now is an equity partner with a big firm in downtown Cleveland. And she's the smartest person I know, and she just challenges me every day. And she loves to travel, and that's our passion now, just
Will
traveling
you
around.
be traveling after you sometime in the future?
Well, we had 3 trips planned for this year, all international ones. All 3 got canceled because, no countries,
Pandemic.
yeah, nobody's letting them
No
in.
one wants us.
No one wants us. Well, but yeah, we've rebooked them for next year. And the one thing that, because of the job she has and me stepping down and cutting down my hours, we're going to really step up our travel.
You can always travel to Youngstown, Ohio from where you live.
There you go.
Best memory.
Best memory. Wow. God, I mean, you're going to think this is corny, and I'm dead serious about it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
This thing that still gives me kind of goosebumps was our marriage ceremony. It was just, I don't know. It was just a surreal moment for me.
Nothing wrong with that. Okay. Okay. Best experience.
I don't know if there's been a single best experience, but in general, it literally has been our ability to travel. One of the things that we do when we travel is we'll try to read as much as we can about the history and the culture of the city or the country that we're going to be in. And it's been interesting. Probably in the last 5 or 6 years, my wife is a travel planning expert, and she's figured out how to get private tours with local scholars, right?
Oh, that's okay.
So, for instance, I think last year we were in Morocco, and it was the first time we've ever been in Morocco. And there was a driver, but our tour guide, who spoke, I think he said 7 different languages, had his PhD in Moroccan history, right? So it was just we go to Scotland a lot. And both my grandmothers were born in Scotland. And for the last 4 years, he's not a guide anymore. He's become our friend. And we've got a 5th trip booked with him in May of next year if it goes. He's working on his PhD in Scottish history. So it's just, we really just enjoy, we're not ones to lay on the beach, right?
You want to do stuff. You want to go active.
It's like when we hit the ground, we're just driving ourselves from sunrise till midnight, trying to just take in as much as we can, taking as much of the culture as we can, the food as we can, and the history as we can. It's so it's, I guess, just travel in general.
Yeah, I went on my honeymoon last year before all this happened in September. My wife and I went to Italy.
Oh, what part?
We first did Dublin and then went to Venice and then Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we broke them up, and I said, if we're going to Dublin, I'm going to make the trip to Italy somehow, because I'm Italian. So we went to Venice and Rome, and it was the same thing. as soon as we were there, we dropped. We just relaxed for an hour because of the time change. Got up and started walking around. We were kind of centrally located in some areas, and then got late. Got back up. Did the same. Did tours. Did walking. We did it all.
So
Well, almost all, as much as you can do in two days.
let me give you my best travel and your listeners my best travel tip. What month were you in Italy?
We were in Italy end of September, beginning of October.
Okay, so did you go to St. Mark's in Venice?
We did. We went to St. Mark's, but we were unable to get in because of the long lines.
Okay. There is the reason you should never go. We always go off season, right?
There's an off season.
Yeah, so if you go to Venice in November or December, is it 75 degrees? No, it's 55 degrees. But
I'm okay with that.
terrible. You walk right into St. Mark's. There is no line. And then one of the things that we've done is if we're in a cathedral as beautiful as St. Mark's and they have a Sunday Mass and we're in the city, we attend the Mass. Because here's what people don't understand about St. Mark's is generally if you wait 3 hours in line, you are pushed through and out in 15 minutes.
Ah.
And guess what? They don't turn the lights on. You'll never see the Botticellis on the wall. You'll never see the gilded ceiling. You'll never see the gilded altar unless they turn the lights on. They're almost invisible to you.
Yeah, the thing I loved about Italy, and I still always will, is the churches.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean, you go into some of these churches, like we had a tour guide and did like the crypts, and this church was built on top of another church that was built on, it was like.
Did you go to the Vatican? Were you in Rome?
So there's a sore subject for me. So I wanted to see St. Peter's Square. I just want to see because we went to Vatican. We had a scheduled museum St. Peter's tour and the Sistine Chapel and stuff like that. Well, unfortunately, we get there and there's a sign that says St. Peter's will empty out at noon, and we're like, oh, okay, okay. Well, our tour was at 1:15. They closed it because the Pope was doing mass in there, and we could not go. I was not happy.
I'll bet.
I traveled 2,000 miles because St. Peter's was one of the ones I wanted to see the most. And
here's a funny story. Again, we had a private tour of the Vatican with a historian, and so we cut all the lines.
Right.
Off season, there were still lines. And it was really funny. It's kind of like the first time you see the Mona Lisa and you turn the corner and you look at it and you go, you're kidding me. That's the Mona Lisa. Because it's like this big, right? I always thought it was like 6 feet tall. But when the Vatican is stunning. But when I walked into the Sistine Chapel and I looked up and I said, really? That's all there is? It did not impress me. It did not impress me as compared to other parts.
Well, what's more impressive, the Sistine Chapel or Spock?
Spock.
Just over your left shoulder.
There he is.
So, who's your role model?
Interesting. I'm not sure it's a role model, but taking absolutely nothing away from my father. My father and I had a great relationship, and my father, more than anyone in my life, drove me to be insatiably intellectually curious. I mean, I'm just a sponge for knowledge. I'm just a voracious reader. I read on almost every single subject there is. But my one grandfather was a very successful businessman, and he wanted to instill in me a work ethic. And so I think when I was 8 years old, he said, "Okay, I want to hire you to cut my grass." And he was very particular about the way he wanted his grass cut, right? Really particular. And so when I cut it for the very first time, we sat down at his kitchen table, and he pushed 5 $1 bills across the table at me. He said, "Well, there's your pay." And that was a lot of money back then.
Well, I mean, you're still only 39 years old.
Right, exactly. And he said to me, "Jimmy, what are you going to do with that?" And I said, "Oh, Grandpa, there's a model at Amers I want to buy, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that." And he said, "Okay." And he said, he pulled $3 back. I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this. He said, "You spend that $2 any way you want to, but you and I are going to invest the $3. And he got me to understand that your budget for living expenses is 20% less than what your take-home pay is. I mean, I worked from the time I was 8 years old to the time I'm 66 years old now. I've always worked. And I always will take 20% of my income and invest it. Okay. So, maybe I couldn't drive a Corvette or whatever it is I denied myself, but my living expenses was 20% of less than my take home. If you do that from the time you're 8 years old to the time you're 66 years old, you put together a really nice investment portfolio. And that's how my wife and I are able to travel around the world. My other grandfather, beginning when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, would pick me up every Saturday morning. There were some exceptions, but we would drive down to Mill Creek Park and we would cook breakfast. And then we would start hiking through different parts of Mill Creek Park. And he would identify every tree by its leaves, every flower, every bird song. He said, and he just taught me this incredible love and appreciation for nature. And people are amazed to this day that we'll be sitting on our deck and I go, "Oh, that's a blue jay," or "That's a cardinal," or, "What tree is that?" And he just instilled this amazing love of nature that I still have to this day.
Okay, nothing wrong with that. Informational knowledge. If there was, and here's the last one, if there was one person you would want to meet, past or present, who would it be?
Wish you would have set these out in advance. I could sound smarter with my answers.
That's why, hey, this is just how it's done.
You know what? I think Steve Jobs. I've read a lot about him. I was particularly focused on the early days of Apple. I just love his ideation methodology. I love his management style. And I just think I'd love to have a beer with Steve Jobs.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But that's a good one, because you're picking a brain that is way more just thinking years ahead.
Yep.
Of what's coming down.
Yep. There is.
So,
if people really want to understand the genius of Steve Jobs, there are some really, really great YouTube videos of some of his earliest days at Apple. And I would, especially if you want to be a founder, especially if you want to do a startup, I would really encourage you to study Steve Jobs' early days at Apple.
Okay, that's some great advice. Well, Jim, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's always a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having us.
Always a pleasure. I hope we'll help you back later in the future. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Check out anthonyvspano.com for more podcast interviews. And Jim, it's always a pleasure. Everyone, be safe and